Hey folks, Dave Paulides, Canada Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video page. And we're back at Hungry Horse Reservoir. A lot of really good comments about the Osprey nest in my background, right between the island and the shore. A little bit about Osprey that people don't know is they're big birds, they're hawks. And at about 18 months, their little ones fly off, get big, go on their own. And April and May, they're laying their eggs. And they're terrific fishermen. And that's the predominant part of their diet. They'll go after frogs and snakes as well. But there's a lot of small creeks that feed the reservoir that have a lot of fish. And they'll fly during the day a long ways to get some food. And sometimes if you watch an osprey flying along, you'll see them reposition the fish before they get to the nest. And bald eagles have been known to chase them and try to steal their food. So it's an interesting sight here to watch them. I've sat in this exact spot for a long time watching them feed their young and deal with the mom and dad of the house. These nests sometimes get to be as thick as 10 feet, and they lifetime after lifetime, they keep coming back to the same nest. So this is a pretty famous one around here. So that's my little spiel about Osprey. And if you get up to Hungry Horse, I am on the West Side Road. It stays paved for several miles after you leave the dam, and then it turns to dirt. Where it turns to dirt, it gets brutal, so unless you have a high clearance car, don't go into the dirt. But the pavement is nice. So, a few things that I want to make sure that people know about. I'm going to start saying this every video. Do not purchase our books on Amazon, eBay, anywhere online other than our website, our online website where we have a store, and that's NA like North America, BigfootSearch.com. The pinned comment, that's the first comment right under the video, is where I'll have the links to the store, where to watch our documentaries for free, etc. So pay attention to that. A lot of people would say, well, they can't find the pinned document. That's the first one. If you have read one of my books, people always go to Amazon to read the reviews and make a decision about purchasing. So I'd appreciate it if you went and left a review. First thing, to the mailbag. Dear Dave, I'll briefly retell my 411-like experience, which occurred approximately 40 years ago when I was 9 years old in 81 in Glacier National Park on Going to the Sun Road. Folks, the Going to the Sun Road is epic. And this year, you're going to need a reservation. So if you're going to Glacier this summer, make sure to contact the Park Service and get your spot so you can go the day you're here. Otherwise, you're going to be really frustrated. It got so packed on that road last year that they decided to make a reservation-only system. It's going to be kind of a pain, but it should relieve the traffic congestion they had on it. It was around midnight, and my father, mother, and younger brother and I were driving to the hotel where we were staying in Glacier National Park. We had been driving for hours, very little traffic, perhaps only 2 or 3 cars in the last 3 hours. And that's the way it is in Montana. After, say, 9 or 10 o'clock, you get up into those rural roads, not a lot of people driving around. There was fresh snow making the whole scene sparkle white. The sky was perfectly clear, starry, but no wind. There was a picturesque and a majestic nighttime drive that can be a magical part of the world. My 7-year-old brother was asleep next to me in the back seat of our big blue Chevy. My mother was asleep in the front passenger seat. My father was driving quietly. We had not spoken in an hour or so, and we weren't playing music, etc., just driving in silence. Around midnight, and very suddenly, it felt to me as if we had crossed an unseen veil. From one second to the next, I went from leaning gently against the window watching the scenery to sitting bolt upright with goosebumps in my hair standing on end. These are some of those things I tell people to pay attention to how your body reacts to the surroundings. Don't ignore it. Your body's telling you something. Back to the email. I started to scan the road and ahead and look carefully in all directions. My brother and mother remained asleep, and my father seemed to notice nothing, but I was electric and hyper-aware with adrenaline surging. This went on for about 1 to 2 minutes. Then, far in the distance ahead, I noticed a gray-white figure standing in the middle of our lane, looking at us with huge black eyes. My father also saw it and asked somewhat rhetorically, "What is that?" We gradually slowed down as we approached it, and it felt like it was staring into my soul. My father seemed way too casual and even started mumbling a little. I remember thinking that he was babbling. We ended up stopping about 20 feet before it was in front of us with our high beam shining right on it. It was approximately 3 to 4 feet high, gray-white in color, and had huge black eyes. It almost looked like it was wearing a cape. It was standing precisely in the middle of our lane, staring straight at me without moving. Noteworthy is that both my father and I prodded my brother and mother, but neither woke or stirred at all, which seemed incongruent to me as we had poked them both somewhat vigorously. It didn't make sense. When neither my brother or mother could be woken, and my father seemed partially incoherent and mumbling, I was left in a sense alone as a 9-year-old boy in the middle of an isolated place making intense eye contact with something I couldn't understand. I was freaked. After an undefined amount of time, perhaps 2 to 3 minutes, the whole atmosphere went awry. Time felt indistinct. It crouched down and it flew up over our car as a too big owl. It was simply too big. My dad snapped out of the state of semi-incoherence and casually said, "Oh, that must have been a local bird," and drove on as if nothing had happened. Okay, that was the end of the email. Well, I followed up because I was curious. What the heck was it? He needed to add more description. So I asked a series of questions and he responded. My questions: was it standing upright on 2 feet? Did it have human-type legs? His response: the feet and legs were hidden behind the wings or the cape and couldn't be seen. When it took off in flight and flew up over the car, I was shocked and I didn't notice any legs or feet. Perhaps they were there and I simply couldn't see it. I asked him, did it have a human-type head? Not really. The eyes were very big. Perhaps half the head was eyes. 2 very large, unblinking black eyes. The body and face were covered in off-white feather or fur. And I asked him to describe it a bit more. Although I didn't recognize the entity as an owl until the end when it flew away, basically the entity appeared to be an owl about 3.5 foot high, almost 1 foot wide at the head. Somebody's parked here. 1 foot wide and 2 feet wide at the base. It was entirely white or slightly off-white. Only the 2 big black eyes were not white. And of course we may ask, if it looked like an owl, why do I believe that it wasn't just an owl? The answer: the powerful, energetic experience I had starting 2 minutes before we saw it. My hair was standing on end. I felt like my whole body was electric. Adrenaline was surging and I was genuinely afraid. All before we saw it. The sheer size was far too big for any known owl. It exuded a sense of intelligence and purpose. Example: it was standing precisely in the center of our lane looking directly at me. It did not fly away as our car approached. The fact that my mother and brother could not be roused from sleep by normal means during the episode scared me. Did the eyes glow or reflect off the headlights? His answer: that's a very interesting question. It did not have that red eye effect that can sometimes be seen with animals at night when a light is shined on them. The eyes were pitch black and glossy. The eyes did not glow, but they were shiny and did reflect on the headlights of the car. I've heard a lot of freaky sightings, but that's one of the best. And considering it happened in my backyard, I'm going to start paying attention. I've never heard of anything like this before. Now, if you do some research on owls, you're going to find some interesting things. Owls historically, way back in Roman times, had significance. And they have, I don't know, just go do some research on it regarding yourself and you'll see. Next letter. I have been a book and YouTube fan of yours for a number of years and thought it was time to share an experience I had in Estes Park, Colorado in October 95. Just so people know, Estes Park is the gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park just outside of Denver, a place I spent many times. Yeah, well, I lived there for 10 years. Although the experience happened to me, my ex-husband was a witness, and it was not disturbing enough that we never spoke about it afterwards. I have not told anyone of it or written of it until now. Just a little about me. I'm 62-year-old, retired from the finance industry, and both intelligent and intuitive. Prior to 1995, I had a few strange experiences as a young teen, which included one out-of-body experience seeing a UFO hover over my parents' backyard. After getting through my teenage years, I focused on my grades and career, and not much strangeness happened. Throughout my life, I've been a casual and not a serious hiker, so please excuse me for not remembering more details about my experience at Estes. We were well into our backyard and wanted to make one last hike before heading back home. I woke up that morning feeling under the weather and really wanted to skip the hike, but knew that my husband would be disappointed if I did. I bundled up in layers as it was chilly out. I knew there might be a snow at higher elevations. Our hike started out fine, but once we got higher, there was a slight snow. The trail got slippery. There was some wind, and I could feel myself panicking a little. My husband was more impulsive than I and ahead of me on the trail. Part of me wanted to stop and go back down the trail, but I continued on. At some point after hiking a few hours, we turned off the trail to the right and came across a pond or small lake encircled by large boulders. For some reason, the sky was clear there and bright blue. The sun was warm, and it was a marked difference from the snowy, slippery trail. As we stood looking at the pretty spot, I was shocked to hear carousel music. What? It sounded like a short distance away, but I could not see anything that would explain it. I asked my husband if he heard it, and he said no. I sat down on a boulder at the edge of the water and decided to unpack lunch. My husband said he would find a spot to urinate and be right back. I checked the time as he wanted to make it back to the trailhead while it was still light. As I was sitting there, I could not help but gaze at the beautiful spot. It felt like I was in a dream or trance. The weather was warm and perfect. It was quiet and still. I remember feeling warm and then hotter and not understanding that as we had just come off a snowy trail. For some reason, my feet and upper torso were burning up, and I took off my hiking shoes, socks, and outer shirt layers. I remember wondering if I was having a hot flash. I remember sweating and considering cooling off in the pond. I ditched that idea when I heard my husband crying and wailing behind me. I turned around to see him in a state of panic. "Where the F have you been? I've been searching all over for you." He was shaking, and I did not doubt what he was saying, but thought that he had possibly gotten lost. Of course, I told him I'd been right here. He was furious and asked me to get dressed so we could get back down the trail before it starts getting dark. I checked my watch as I was sure it had only been 15 or 20 minutes. My watch said an hour and a half had passed. I could not breathe as I could not understand that and asked my husband to check his watch. He did and said that yes, it had been searching for me for an hour and a half. I was flabbergasted, could not begin to make sense of what had happened, but quickly got dressed and followed him down the trail. Back at the cabin, I tried to eat dinner but ate little. Honestly, I think it was a slight state of shock as to what had happened. The next day I had slept late, and we headed downtown to get a meal and to visit the art galleries before driving home. One art gallery had a small section dedicated to paintings and sections of the same scene. As I got closer to them, I could see excuse me. I could see they all depicted the pond we were at the previous day. All of these different artists painting the drawing of the same spot. Did that play some kind of magic? No, thank you. I quickly left the gallery and waited for my husband outside. I was very relieved to head home the following day. Well, that was my experience, which of course I cannot explain and hope to never repeat again. After that, I had some missing time while driving incidents, but nothing major. Blessings to you for all your work. So, I passed that story along to several people I know in Boulder and around Denver area that always go to Estes to see if they knew the name of that pond. They didn't. And I asked this person if they could ID it by looking at a map, and they tried and they couldn't. But it's a freaky story. And again, well, here's another one. This one just happened this morning. I have a buddy that works for an outdoor company, and he's my age, He's been hunting for years, decades. And they were turkey hunting the other day. And he said that he was with a buddy. I won't say the state, but it's in the Midwest. And they were hunting together for a long time, and then for some reason they just started to split up. And he said right after they split up, he was alone for just a short while, and he said everything went quiet. And he's read all my books. He's a close friend. And he said, yeah, it freaked me out. And especially since it happened right after he split up with his friend. He said he paid close attention to what was going on. And then he got back to his friend. He goes, hey, what'd you do? Why'd you split up with me? And then he sent me a series of texts after that. And what I told him is what I'm going to tell you. And that is, if something that happens like that to you, in the middle of that, get out your phone and video a 360 pan of where you're at, including the sky. Because a lot of things we can't see with the naked eye, but for some reason we can pick it up on a phone. So it's well worth it if you do it. So the view you're looking at, that direction that you're looking is southeast. That's the east side of Hungry Horse Reservoir, where those big mountains are, snow-capped. And you're looking towards the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and it's an epic place. Some of the most remote locations in the lower 48. Really, really a gorgeous area. And kind of look it up, Google the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and you'll see. Great place. Lots of bears. So, on to the stories. Got 3 stories for you today. And the first one happened January 22nd, 1955. 6 years old, Howard Newell, Newell. Little River Harbor, Nova Scotia, where it happened. And that would have been just east, across the water, from Acadia National Park in Maine. That's Howard. So, it's about 20 miles southeast of Shag Harbor. Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, very famous place. Look it up and you'll see why. Well, family members of Howard with his uncle, they were cutting firewood. A lot of things happen when you cut firewood, and I can't explain it. But a lot of stories I've written involve people going into the woods cutting firewood. So his uncle and his family are out there. There's patches of snow. And at the end of the day, they decide, or after they got enough wood, they decide to go back to their cabin, their house. And on the way back, Howard decides to take a shortcut, he said. And he'd been in this area many times. He knew the area very well. And he didn't show up at the house. And pretty soon the family went out looking for him. They couldn't find any tracks. They found some tracks immediately where he started off from the group, but then none. And soon they called the RCMP and local neighbors. A massive search. The Yarmouth Army Reserve showed up. Naval training recruits from Nova Scotia showed up. Bethany Bible College people showed up. Naval training recruits showed up. And there were over 1,000 people within 14 hours looking for Howard. The ponds were checked, and his uncle and his father showed up and said none of the ice on any of the ponds were broken. And all of the ice had covered all of the water. The RCMP first thought that maybe he was hit on a road. That was discounted because nobody could figure out or had seen a car drive on any of those remote roads. Then the RCMP said that he had drowned, but that was discounted by his father and his uncle. Now, one of the things that came up in this story is that the family said that Howard wasn't a smart kid. The family knew he was brilliant. And he had, for being 6 years old, an unreal religious conviction. For Christmas the year before, he asked for a picture of Mary and Jesus. And the family got it for him, and he put that over his bed. And every night he would put it over his bed, and he said it protected him. Now that is weird for a 5-6-year-old boy to do that, in my humble opinion. Well, the family came out later on in subsequent months after hundreds and hundreds of searches and 2 weeks of searching with 1,000 people, and the RCMP's decision was he drowned. Again, none of the ice was broken, none of the water was open. The people and the parents did not believe it, and it was an answer to quell the community's concern. So you have point of separation, you have water, you have intellect, and you have weather, because during the search it did snow. Once again, brilliant boy, Howard Newell. Now, I'm going to show you this picture. I want you to pay attention to it. So, here's a picture of the area. This is the Bay of Fundy. This is Maine right here. And this is Maine right here. And this is the border between Canada and Maine, Nova Scotia. Has anybody watched the series Oak Island? It's right there. Here's where Howard disappeared, right here. You got water everywhere. Case has always bothered me since I wrote about it. And for someone to disappear and never be found, because he was never found in the years subsequent to the disappearance in 1955, the family was always disturbed by it. And of course, in those rural areas like that, the family knew everybody in the region and everybody helped. So that's case number 1, firewood case, middle of nowhere, Little River Harbor, Nova Scotia. The next case involves a 19-year-old man from Washington, Logan Schiedeman, Schiedelman, Schiedelman. May 19th, 2016, Tumwater, Washington. Talk about good-looking boy, young man, really. He's 19, not a boy anymore. Good-looking young man, and he was an athlete. Played football in high school, went on to the University of Washington after high school. He was a good student, very humble. Everybody said he was quiet, introspective. He wasn't a troublemaker. Well, after his freshman year, his grandmother, who he lived with when he was growing up, said that something changed. She said maybe he didn't have enough friends in college, and there were some rumors that maybe he was smoking some weed. Big deal. Cracks me up when people make a big deal about that. But on May 19th, he was seen at home by his grandmother. And he told her that he had an epiphany, and he was going to explore this epiphany, and she said he never said what the epiphany was. But on May 20th, Washington State troopers got a 911 call that a 1996 black Chrysler Sebring, license plate AVJ 8434, was weaving across 3 lanes of traffic southbound of I-5 south of Tumwater, Washington. So, here's the map. Here's Tumwater right here. Here's Maytown, and Logan's vehicle was weaving across 3 lanes of traffic down in this area. And I can tell you that this region here, very rural, lots of brush. But the weird thing was is that people said there was nobody in the driver's seat, but the car was weaving. And it was still moving. So that's odd in and of itself. Then it hit a center barricade. It came to a stop. So the Washington State Patrol went out there. Nobody was in the car. But in the center console area, there were bags of groceries and things. And Logan's wallet, his keys, and his cell phone were in the car. Now, there were some people that said that they saw somebody run from the car who they thought was a white male. And later on, they said it wasn't Logan. They thought it was a white male. They should be careful with that. State police brought in, did a massive search of the area. Didn't find anything. One thing about Logan, he had a severe peanut allergy. Kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Interviewed the grandmother, and the grandmother said that it was completely out of character for Logan to go missing and to treat his things like he did. A lot of people have said that they thought this was a voluntary disappearance and he purposely fell off the face of the earth. 19 years old, separates himself from his phone, his wallet, his car. Hard to believe. Well, it's been 5 years and Logan hasn't been found. So, canines never pick up a scent. Helicopters did the search. Extremely out of character. Grandma filed a missing persons report. It's one of those things that it could go either way as a 411 case right now. But I bring it up because it's in an area where there's been a lot of disappearances in Washington. That's why I'm telling you about it right now. Now, let me ask you a question. Let's see how good you guys are about your geography and facts. What's the capital of Washington State? Drum roll. It's Olympia. And a lot of people get that question wrong. And because Olympia really isn't talked about much in the news if you don't live in Washington State. So that's case number 2. Case number 3 involves a man named Michael Watts, W-A-T-T-S, 37 years old. It's a very recent case, just happened a couple weeks ago, May 1st, 2021 in Portland. He was an armed security guard for Eugene, Oregon hospital. People said he was extremely stable. Now, I'm doing this case not because I can guarantee it's a 411 case, but because it's current, this man's missing, and his family is at wit's end. So I want you to really pay close attention. This is Michael, described as a very good man, wanted to be a nurse. That's why he was working at the hospital as a security guard. And he had an unusual passion, as he could impersonate Freddie Mercury really well. And he was an actor and a stuntman in the past. So he disappeared on May 1st, 2021. Checked into his hotel, and that Saturday night, he went to a nightclub called CC Slaughters. And it was a gay nightclub. He was not gay. He had a girlfriend. And after he performed that night and bought some drinks, he left the bar and was walking back to his hotel. And as he's walking back to the hotel, he's talking to his girlfriend. People who follow Missing 411 know that many people have disappeared while being on the phone. Some have said that they were followed, chased by something, someone, somewhere, and then they are gone. And that's basically what happened to Michael. So, he's going down the street. One story says that his girlfriend had an app on his phone that said where he was all the time, and she said, "You're walking in the wrong direction from the hotel." Another article stated that he was on the phone with his girlfriend and told the girlfriend that somebody was chasing him, and he was out of breath. And then the phone went dead. Not sure which story is true, or maybe both are. But she tried to call him back, didn't get an answer, and he never went back to the hotel. So, here's the map. What you got here is the Willamette River. If nobody's ever been in downtown Portland, it is freaking awesomely beautiful little town. I would never, ever go there right now because they've had too much violence there for the last 5 or 6 months. But there's CC Slaughters. Here's the Marriott Hotel where he was staying. And there's the most direct route right down 3rd to where he was staying. And it was on this route that a female friend of his walked the next morning and unbelievably found his phone in the middle of the street. So Michael is 5'9", 180, not a huge guy. They went back, searched the hotel room. All of his belongings were there. When I was raising my kids, I talked about something called exposure. As an example, if you only drive roads in a city between the time of 9 p.m. till 3:30 a.m., your chances of being hit by a drunk driver are huge compared to somebody who drives city roads between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. because there's more drunk drivers on the road. So you're exposing yourself to a greater threat of being killed by a drunk driver. Just one example of exposure. When you go to a city that has had a history of the months prior of violence in the street, you're putting yourself at risk. Now, Michael lived in Eugene. It's hard for me not to understand how he didn't know what was going on in Portland. But I'm not blaming him at all for what happened to him, because you can't blame a victim for what happens to him. But I'm telling you, watch your exposure level at different things. And as a parent, you're always thinking about that with your kids. But in this incident, why was he walking away from the hotel when his girlfriend looked at the app? That doesn't make sense to me. He's classified by the Portland police as a missing person. That's it. I just have a hard time understanding this case because his family said this is completely out of character for him. Folks, it's not easy to get rid of a body, contrary to what anybody says. It's very difficult, especially as the body gets ripe. Now, if two people were chasing him on the sidewalk and this was a case of street violence, my guess would be they would have beat him on the street, stolen his wallet, and ran, and we would have found him. But they didn't find anything. And that's bothersome to me. So that's Michael Watts. And I hope his family gets some closure to this quickly. 37 years old, a good man. The hospital where he works at misses him. His girlfriend misses him immensely. I hope these cases have given you something to think about. Howard Newell case, firewood. We're taking natural things. Oh, that's the Osprey. He's back at the nest. Oh, that's awesome. That, friends, is Mother Nature at its best. Wow, we were lucky. We're really lucky we got to see that and hear that. No, they're now bedded in, and I think that was my chime to let you go. I really appreciate the friendship that's grown here on this channel, the polite nature of the people that we've associated with and are part of our village. I'm blessed. I appreciate each of you for your fine comments. And remember, we have over 110 videos now. And they start all the way at the very beginning with videos I made in Colorado with Ben. And then videos I made when I was on my book tour in Australia. And then there's the videos of the trailers for the movies, all at the beginning. When I see that stuff in nature, it just humbles me. Well, I hope you have a quiet, peaceful, and happy week. And I appreciate the support you've given me over the years. Again, look at the pinned comments for all of our contacts and all of our website links. And I hope you have a great week.